All right, guys, coming back at you. You could probably tell that I'm getting more excited and as the videos go on because that's what I love to do and it's fun and interesting. Anyway, also, man, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. I should have just got some more sleep, but so don't laugh at the bags on the eyes and everything else. Anyway, look, we're gonna talk about committees and subcommittees. All right, so we're looking at four big types of committees. The first type of committee is what you call a standing committee, right? And these are subject matter committees that handle bills in different policy areas. So what happens is, remember, a bill is that proposal to make a law. And so when you get that in Congress, or it starts in Congress. So, damn it, I keep messing up. Not Congress is the whole thing. It starts in House of Representatives, right? So this bill starts and says, "Hey, we want to push this particular thing." So that's a standing committee, and there's a ton of standing committees, and I'll point you over to a chart in your book a little later so you can see what those committees look like in both sides, both parts of the House and the Senate, right? Now, joint committees. Joint committees are cool because joint committees are subject matter areas, but they also have membership from the House and the Senate, and they come together and say, "Look, let's figure this thing out." And so these are actually obviously bigger level things where you want to get both sides together, right? And then you have something called a conference committee. Now, if you guys don't remember, a bill will not become a law unless it passes the Senate. And right, so it goes in the House, and let's say the House is like, "Yeah, let's get this done," and the House is cool, but they're a very different body than the other than the Senate. We already talked about how they're different and what they make up and what they represent, and so you might have people, small districts, wanting something, and those small districts have like a groundswell of popularity, and they start getting that thing across, that particular issue or bill across, but then it won't pass the Senate. So what happens in a conference committee is those two groups come together and like they clean up the language to make sure that that particular bill can pass and become a law sooner or later, right? Now, last committee, select committees. All right, they're set up for a particular purpose. It's like a commission, like something crazy happened, boom, let's set that thing up. So a select committee was created to investigate Watergate. And we all remember Watergate from U.S. history. At least we should. With Nixon and everything else. And so those are the select committees. So again, we got standing committees. All right, those are always happening. They just deal with bills and get things done. You have joint committees. Joint is easy. It's just the two houses coming together having the discussions. And then you have conference committees, which again sounds a lot like the joint. The two houses are talking about things, but they're actually just talking to clean up language so that the bills can pass both houses. And then you have select committees for select crazy things that happen, whether extraordinary. Let's not use the word crazy, but extraordinary things that happens in politics. Okay, so those are your committees. All right. Now the table I was talking about, man, it's a table on 12.3. Table 12.3, and it says standing committees in the Senate and the House, and they have some really cool things. Like both of them have appropriations. Appropriations, passing out that money, baby. Appropriate. Who gets what and how do they get it, right? And both of them have finance. Both of them have banking, energy and commerce, armed services, rules, ways and means. I mean, we'll talk about the 4 or 5 more popular ones later. But look at that chart, and you'll see that it's pretty much everything that encompasses what we do as a society in a few committees, less than 15 committees. Let's talk about how committees work. There's two things that you have to think about: legislation and oversight. Legislation is just actually getting bills passed. They're called the legislature for a reason. They got to make laws, baby, right? They are the law people, legality, legislation. And so for every session of the House, that 2 year, they'll look at like 11,000 bills. And you're like, whoa, so that's how many laws are getting made federally? Probably not getting made, not 11,000, because you got to go through the whole process on both sides and get it done. But you're looking at 11,000 bills in a two years period, right? And so they hold hearings, they get together, and they do markup meetings, right? They try to find out, okay, look, you as the congressman from, this district in Michigan around Detroit wants this particular issue to get passed. Why should we all care? Why is it a big enough deal for the whole federal government? Because you are a teeny tiny dude when you look at the whole spectrum of everything, right? So they mark everything up. They draw it out, write it up, and find out, okay, this would be good or would not be good. And then, you know what? Most of what you're saying is good, but just because it's good doesn't mean it will pass. So we have to get the language right, the process right, mark it up, rip it up. It's like taking a first draft and just stripping it of all the excess and then making it what you would, for lack of a better word, making it better, okay? So that's what you do in a markup meeting. Now let's talk about oversight. All right, now you got to monitor bureaucracy. Bureaucracy, obviously, when we talk about how things go from the top to the bottom, right, in a governmental system, and you got to strip a lot, again, stripping fat, right? And so they'll say, okay, look, let's not make it a bureaucratic situation where you have to get all the red tape and get this stamp and that stamp. Let's just sit down, have a committee meeting, and say, this is what we'll do. So you make the Congress even smaller. You make the House of Representatives and Senate even smaller so they can take care of particular issues and get it done and over with. It's like, don't let everybody vote on it. Don't let everybody do this particular thing yet, because then if you have 100 people trying to make a soup, that soup is going to taste weird, right? So what you do is you have 2 people or whatever amount of people make that soup, get it set, and then say, okay, you guys taste it, see if it was right. All right, so that's what the oversight and stripping away the bureaucracy goes to, right? Now, what happens now is this. Because you have C-SPAN, you have CNN, you have all of MSNBC, you have all this publicity of what happens in Congress and what happens with these 2 houses. Oh my goodness, there's way more oversight. And there's so much more money being put into the process that people do need to have more oversight. Because you mess around and get bribes coming in and people doing things that they should not doing. So you have committees to watch the committees. It's crazy, right? It's always like, Big Brother kind of thing. It's like, 1984 or a Brave New World coming at you. And usually the reason why you have oversight is when a catastrophe happens, when something crazy happens, like a scandal of some sort, like Watergate, something that pretty much shouldn't have happened happens. So you don't get a lot of oversight initially, but you're like, oh my God, the budget didn't get done and we are broke. I want to say, 2 years ago, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, when the budget couldn't happen, and they're like, okay, well, non-essential government employees are not going to be getting paid, and the government was shut down for like a week or so. What happens at that point? Well, this is what happens. You have to go back and find out why we had such a big problem, and so you have a Senate or a House Representative Oversight Committee check that out. Now, how do you even get on the committee? Well, first and foremost, when you get elected to the House, you want to go up there and you say, okay, cool, I need to get on the particular committee because that's how I get popular. That's how people know my name. That's how I get seniority. That's how I'm going to be somebody special. So you as a person elected, you're chasing out a particular committee, and you're also chasing out a committee that you have maybe experience or that you're good in. Hey man, if you are someone who went to school for law and public service, you might want to be on a judiciary committee, right? Now, if you're somebody who has a degree in international finance, whatever it is, you want to be on a finance committee. If you're a kind of person who like Sully wants to be an ambassador, and you have that kind of background, the political science background, that kind of stuff, well, you may want to be a foreign affairs kind of person, right? So you're looking at all these different opportunities for you right now. What you do is you express that to the leader in Congress. You say, okay, look, I would love to be on blank committee, and maybe they pick you, maybe they don't, but you express that to them, right? And remember, we talk about the majority leaders or minority leaders. You get to them immediately, right? Yep. Now, if you have been a loyal party member and you follow the rules of the party and you kept your mouth shut and you didn't talk about how the party leader was a goon and a goomba and all kind of crazy stuff, well, guess what? You'll mess around and get that job faster than the person who obviously has not been a loyal party member. So part of this is not about just being right. It's about being loyal to your party and voting a certain way and being a particular way, right? And, the parties try to give you what you want, but sometimes you don't get it because somebody else has more seniority than you or whatever the situation is. Now, the best way to get ahead in a committee is become the committee chair. Now, it's a very influential role, right? And you get to schedule the hearings, you get to hire staff, you get to appoint the subcommittees, what you guys will talk about, the bills that are going to be brought before the full House. All that stuff is right there in front of your face. And so if you become a lead or a head of one of these committees, you're really a real policymaker. You are a legislature. You are the real person. So really, you have 435 people in the House of Representatives and you have 100 people in the Senate, but if you're not on one of these committees and you're not leading one of these committees, you're really not driving what the Congress does. You're just a voter. You're just a guy that says yes or no. All right? So you're not a mover and shaker until you become one of these committee heads, right? Now, it's almost picked on the fact that you've been there longest. It's usually seniority. So you'll see a whole bunch of gray hairs on there, usually, right? Now, and also, your party has to be controlling Congress at the time. If your party is controlling the House at the time or the Senate at the time, that gives you a much better situation because your majority leader gets to pick. It's not like the minority leader can be like, I'm going to pick all my guys for these committees. It doesn't work like that way. It's usually majority leader gets to pick more often than the minority leader, which makes a whole bunch of sense. Now, we're going to cut this video short, and the next one's going to be, we're going to do caucuses, and then pretty much finish up with this whole shebang. Hopefully it's working for you, all right? Man, love.